Welcome, welcome, everybody. My name is Chase Enemy. I am the head of product design here at Disco. I am going to be covering pretty much the entire session here. A little bit about myself. So I lead product and design here at Disco, and I myself am an instructor. So I've taught within my own community, which is for designers who are working at the intersection of design and growth. I have also taught at various post-secondary education schools, with the University of Waterloo Department of Engineering being the main one. And then I've also ran my own accelerator programming as well. And so done a lot of kind of instructional design and program design within that context as well, working with startups. Learning, super passionate about learning, really excited to walk through today how to build out AI fluency programs, and then also what kind of putting that into practice may look like in a tool like Disco as well. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will get right in. I'm joined with several members of my team here. Kush and Josh are here as well. You guys can feel free to jump in if you've got any comments as well. Arthi is here as well. I see her hand being raised. Yeah, shout out to the rest of the Disco team. If anybody wants to join and add some commentary at any point, feel free to jump right in. All right, but with that, let's get into it. So to start, who is in the room with us? I'll do a little raise of hands in terms of where everybody is at in their AI fluency journey after this, but who Disco typically serves and who is normally on this call would be a mix of these three different groups. So one is training businesses. So that would be like virtual academies or boot camps who are running online training programs as their core business. The other one would be communities and networks. So maybe accelerators and incubators who are obviously offering learning programs to startups, or associations and just community network groups. And then the last one would be, of course, companies and teams who are doing either internal training, and so upskilling their internal teams, or actually educating their customers and partners. So that's typically who's joining these calls right here. But with that, I will get everybody to just like drop in the chat. I'm curious where everybody is at today with your own AI fluency program. So just drop a little number in the chat in terms of one, just starting to think about AI fluency programs. Two, you have something, but it's not working really well. Three, you have something working well, but you want to scale what's already been working. And then four is you've got really strong programming, but maybe you're just looking for a platform to deliver that on. Feel free to just drop some comments in the chat. It's always helpful to know where people are coming at for this session. Sandra, scale, okay. Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks so much for that input there. In terms of agenda today, so what I'm going to go through is one, what's the problem with AI training today and how companies are typically focused on delivering these learning programs. The second one is going to be going through our AI fluency hierarchy. So there's a wonderful article, maybe somebody on the team can post, that Candice wrote, which is a really helpful way just in terms of thinking about how do you actually empower transformation within your organizations when it comes to AI fluency. The next thing we'll go through is design principles for transformation. So this is really like our Disco point of view on how you break through the noise of maybe traditional training and what actually leads to transformation. And then the last one would be, how do you build these human-first learning experiences that create transformation with AI in a platform like Disco? So we'll go through that at the end. So with that, obviously, AI is completely revolutionizing right now the economics and the cost structure of every single business. And so I'm sure you all are here because you're actively working on AI fluency programs. We at Disco are obviously getting a ton of training businesses signing up, customers, companies signing up to actually train either their customers or people within their organization. And so a lot of organizational change is happening right now to be able to adapt to this AI era. Something that's really interesting, though, is the biggest barrier to AI isn't actually an adoption of the technology, it's organizational change. And so that's a lot about what Candice and I have been talking about with a bunch of the customers that we're speaking with. We've never really had like a technology problem. There's lots of wonderful tools out there that can help us leverage AI, but it's really a people problem in terms of actually empowering and creating that organizational change. And that's not something that is very easy to do. Something that we very much focus on is AI is capable of making companies actually more human. So a lot of times we hear this language of AI first, AI native. It can almost feel anti-human. And so we almost see this though as something that can make us more human first in our approaches. And so there's this really great quote here by Tim O'Reilly that goes, using humans augmented with AI to solve problems that were previously impossible in ways that were previously unthinkable and in ways that make our machine systems more attuned to the humans they are meant to serve. AI first puts human first. This is something that very much resonates with us. Like at Disco, we very much started as being a social learning platform that really focuses on human-centric learning. And we just find that ever since we've been incorporating and building in AI to be more native in the platform, this is actually empowering a more human first experience as opposed to taking away from it. And so our thesis here is really, in the age of AI, human connection just became the competitive advantage. And people will need continuous transformation to stay really relevant. And they'll learn best really through personalized, human-centric experiences that happen with their peers. And so our goal is to make it effortless for organizations to turn that experience into transformative learning programs that blend AI efficiency with that irreplaceable human connection that we all need and crave so much. And so a little bit about the platform before we jump into the content. Disco is an AI-first learning platform, and our mission at Disco is about unlocking human potential. So we build a purpose-built platform to deliver human-centric learning experiences that feel really effortless and deliver those transformative outcomes for members. Obviously, we are trusted by a bunch of wonderful organizations that we'll showcase a couple later and throughout the presentation. And yeah, again, back to our mission is really around using AI to unlock human potential as opposed to just replacing it. And so where we kind of start is where are we at right now and what is the problem with the learning of today? And we at Disco believe that most learning that happens is fake. It's basically passive consumption of content that doesn't actually lead to any real behavior change. Real learning needs to actually transform behavior to have positive outcomes as opposed to just consumption. And so the problem and why most organizations are getting learning wrong is what most organizations do is they might offer a one-off workshop to upskill somebody around a particular topic. They offer really generic one-size-fits-all sort of tutorials, and they will just offer a library of on-demand resources. Why that doesn't really stick is there's no real world like application in your actual flow of work. There's often no real social accountability because it's programming that you can do just on your own. There's no practice loops for actually putting it, like I said, into that flow of work. And finally, there's often just like no relevance to you, your role, the jobs that you're trying to do every single day. And for something like AI fluency, there's a lot of hidden costs of getting this wrong. And so obviously with creating all of this organizational change that we need to have happen right now, this is really critical to get right. If we get this wrong, employees are going to feel really anxious and not be able to build out their capabilities. Leaders will mandate AI adoption without actually equipping and empowering people. Investment in AI tools, so it's just really underutilized. And so we've already started to see a lot of that, even studies showing up that there hasn't really been efficiency gains in actually implementing new AI tooling the way people thought. And it's because the actual people behind using those tools have not been empowered. And finally, the gap between AI aware and AI capable just really widens, right? Everybody becomes very aware of AI at a surface level, but actually being capable and using it in their day-to-day really just widens. And so another thing to think about as we get into how do we actually design these programs and deliver, the biggest thing is that your people are not one size fits all. And this goes back to that personalization and relevance piece around you can't deliver a one size fits all generic content or experience, especially when it comes to organizational change and like adopting new technologies. You're always going to have kind of these three different big bucket groups, right? There's three different personas that you need to really build your AI fluency programs around. The first one is your catalysts. So that would be those who are already experimenting, need advanced paths in a lot of like peer communication. You've got your converts who they're like really curious about AI, but a little bit hesitant. They need those like safe to try experiences and quick wins, but are very willing and want to get their skills developed. And then finally, there's the anchors. Those are the resistant, overwhelmed, and really need more foundational confidence and relevance. And that group really needs a lot of emphasis to bring along. There's a great article by Brian Balfour, the CEO at Reforge. He talks a lot about this and would be good to check out if you want a little bit more. And right here we have like Maslow's AIs. This is a concept that Candice came up with. It's her hierarchy of AI fluency. I'll just bring in all of the words here since I didn't realize they were pulling in. But so this is really how we see AI transformation, right? You go from that foundational fluency and understanding all the way to the empowered, curious, AI native humans, employees, workers from like the bottom up. And so at the foundation, you have that sort of general AI foundations, just the understandings of what AI actually is. When your teams need to understand like the underlying mechanics, they need to make better decisions and how to just apply some of the basic tools that they're going to need to get started with. This is also where like safety and ethics, just like literacy, the fear of doing it wrong stops more AI adoption than probably any other factor. And so just creating that sort of like space for these individuals to actually try, experiment, and play with. And obviously just like core application skills. So everyone in your organization should understand how to effectively communicate with some of these core AI systems. And that just establishes your kind of like base foundational layer. This getting up into the second layer right here, this is where your company POV and just having like a sandbox for your company really comes in. And so if you look at there's a lot of great companies out there that are doing really fantastic work like Shopify, Zapier, Duolingo. And what they do is they're not just like providing the foundations to develop skills around AI fluency. They're actually giving like a really concrete point of view for their company, right? How they're seeing AI, how they're seeing various teams and role use cases using AI, and also really setting the tone and having a strong point of view around different AI tools and workflows that people can incorporate. So your company POV in like sandbox just becomes like the space where teams can really safely experiment within obviously defined boundaries. And it just creates some structured freedom where they know how to apply AI within their organization and they know the framework in which they can apply it within. From there, I think that this is like the next phase is like the transformation zone. This is where those like durable skills come in. Most organizations you really struggle at this particular phase, right? They've maybe covered the foundations, maybe they've provided like a high level overview of what their company view is, but breaking into this transformation zone is really challenging. This requires just like really human skills, right? That AI can help amplify, like critical thinking, like curiosity, like agency. And it starts to split into kind of two different paths here. There's scale and efficiency growth. So this is AI's ability to actually generate, personalize, like a near zero marginal costs, like fundamentally changes business economics. So smart companies systematically really examine every workflow. And we've started doing that at Disco. Josh and Kush can comment on this as well, but we've done a lot of work internally on just leveraging AI to examine all of our workflows and be able to optimize so that each individual can actually perform the best in their particular role. And then the other sort of path here is the human first breakthrough. So this is obviously the harder path, but with far higher returns as well. So this requires asking, how can AI make our company more human, not just more efficient, but actually more human and increase just the overall quality of the work that we're doing. So how do we free people from all this tedious work to do more creative, caring, human-centric work that delivers a lot of high value? And then the summit of this hierarchy at the very end is co-intelligence. At the peak sits like a different relationship with AI entirely. It's one that's very forward-thinking. Organizations are achieving, obviously, in 2026. So it's not tool and user, but like genuine like co-creation between AI and individuals within their workflows. So this is very much how we've been viewing what that transformation looks like, and as a helpful lens to just look at where do you think your organizations or your school is really focused on in terms of this overall hierarchy as you see yourself moving forward.
Nice.
Josh, anything you want to
Yeah.
comment on there, just in
Yeah,
terms of
absolutely.
like,
I think you brought up a really good point on sort of the path that you take. And one thing that I'm actually really curious to see what other orgs are working on. I think between different teams, the speed to AI fluency is very different. For example, I came originally from a developer, like a product coding background. And generally what I've found is that engineers have picked up and got a ton of value out of AI very quickly. For over a year now, there's been amazing AI tools that have had like almost an immediate ROI. One thing that I've seen though is that on a lot of other teams, it's harder to see that quickly. So people tend to give up because when you're coding and it's something that immediately saves you like 5 hours of work, it's amazing. But I think the biggest challenge is just having maybe traditionally less technical teams figure out how this fits in, and actually getting value out of it. And that's quite a bit harder to teach and to learn. But if you can figure it out, the returns are incredible. Like Kush and I have been working a lot on the kind of GTM sales side, and some things that we've automated have saved, like one automation will save maybe 10 hours a week. And once you've built it once, it's good forever. So the returns you can get are really good, but it's hard to get there.
awesome. Yeah, thanks, Josh. I think we'll pause for obviously like a longer question Q&A period at the very end. But before we move on into getting into like design principles and putting things really into practice, any questions that are popping up, feel free to raise hand, pop it over into the chat. But just curious before we move on, if any big questions are coming up for people.
Maybe, sorry, I want to make sure I'm not taking over anyone else for questions. But something I have seen come up quite a bit in other orgs is how do you actually measure if you're being successful with AI fluency? To your point before, a lot of orgs will just have some kind of a plan to deploy AI fluency across their teams. But it's hard to say, like, how do you know if it's actually working? What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the measurement's a really good piece. I think that's something we've been thinking about even more, right? Is how do we actually measure like the time spent on like different activities is like the obvious one, is like the efficiency. But I think a more interesting one is, again, going back to the quality side, right? So like for some of the workflows that we've been implementing for our actual customer experience score, are we actually seeing that instead of we're able to focus more on some of those human first like experiences, and is the effect of AI providing us that ability to deliver a higher quality experience and be more human first because we're saving a lot of time on other things? Is that actually increasing the end customer impact for a business like ours? But yeah, great question, Josh. Awesome. I'll jump forward into the next session. What we want to, or the next section, these are essentially like our seven, we call them the 7 Ps, right? The 7 principles of transformative learning at Disco. And so I'll go through each and every one of these. The 7 are essentially peers, projects, playful, personalized, perpetual, prompt, and practice. And so here's what those look like. So peers is essentially learning is best when social. And so instead of actually building out solo courses, build actual cohorts with shared journey across several members. Design peer discussions so you can prompt questions like, what AI tool did you try this week? I know when we first got started in our journey, a lot of it was discussions. And I know the broader kind of feeling from the team was there was so much being talked about in market. People didn't really know what to listen to, what not listen to, what to trust. And people do trust kind of their peers when they're going through a shared experience all together. And so creating that space for discussions where people can learn from people that they trust is really important. The next one is like using accountability structures, right? So having those cohort check-ins, having shared challenges and group projects. We know through studies that like when people are going individually through a course without that accountability, they're a lot less likely to engage. Self-paced on-demand courses have much lower kind of engagement and completion rates than cohort-based ones, for example. And yeah, AI fluency just spreads a lot faster through conversation than actual consumption. And certainly we've seen that at Disco and seen that a lot with our customers who are running more cohort-based centric experiences and breaking those experiences down by even smaller subgroups of members. The next one is projects. So learning is doing. Every module within a learning experience should end in some sort of like real work artifact. So whether it's like a prompt library, an AI generated draft of something, a workflow redesign, having those projects where you can actually apply the learnings immediately into your workflow is really critical. Projects obviously reveal the capabilities a lot better than something more traditional like a quiz, for example. And then the last point here is just like build on iteration, right? So try something, reflect on it, improve it, and share it with the broader group. So I think consistently working on those projects where you can iterate towards having stronger AI skills is really critical here. The next one is playful. So learning should be active. We really focus on at Disco trying to have experiences that are full of energy, feedback, and just forward motion. Obviously, if they're really passive experiences, then it's not creating a lot of engagement. And in Disco, some of the things that can be done is like using things like streaks and leaderboards to actually increase motivation, adding in achievements, so providing things like certifications or badges, and then finally, just obviously nudging learner progress. This is one I know within my cohorts is really key. So based on individual learner behavior, nudging their progress along throughout that cohort is really key. This next one is personalized, so learning is relevant. This is one that just at scale we could not do before AI. And a sales rep obviously should have much different training and AI fluency paths than a product manager. You can use AI to adapt content by role, by industry, by skill level, by what their tool stack is. And so this becomes really critical. And having a strong platform, learning platform like Disco, where you can essentially segment members really smartly based on all of those different criteria, and then be able to build more tailored learning paths for each of them is really key. And so we're seeing that a lot right now where people are wanting to basically through onboarding of their learning members, capture a bunch of information, segment them into different groups, and then be able to use that information to actually build more tailored learning pathways. In some cases, you can also even take an actual customer profile. If you want to build more hyper-personalized programs, you can take like a customer or a member profile and build a program directly around that profile. Obviously, you don't want to make anchors sit through content that's designed for catalysts. Personalization equals higher relevance, higher completion, which will obviously lead to more transformation. Perpetual, so learning is continuous. This is something also we very much see with our Disco customers, like designing a space for continuous activity, not just one-off experiences. So where a lot of learning businesses struggle is when they create one program and they expect that's just gonna do the trick and solve everything when it comes to something like AI fluency. It needs to be a continuous activity. Obviously, it's a space that's moving incredibly fast. And so having that really be continuous, lifelong learning mentality is really important. And also just embedding that learning into your everyday workflow. So rather than having it be entirely this like separate thing, actually having it a part of your regular kind of work week, rituals, etc. The next one is practice. So learning should be very experiential, designing those kind of like recurring rituals. So having, whether it's like weekly AI experiments, doing monthly tool reviews, doing like quarterly cohort challenges, but again, putting things into practice and going through experiences as a way of learning and growing. Embedding more micro moments into your daily work. So rather than, again, diving into these like heavy content experiences, having more micro learning moments inside that daily workflow. The goal is obviously AI fluency becomes how your organization actually operates, not just like a individual program that people attend. And the next one is prompt. We see this one as like really making learning more human, right? To be human is to be like conversational and reflective. And so asking questions that really help to spark curiosity, drive that reflection, and really building experiences around that over purely content delivery. And obviously designing for kind of transformation and not just like skill acquisition. Empowering learners to take agency over their own learning, obviously really important here as well. So prompting can be a really effective strategy for putting that in the learner's hands. And so learning is really your transformation engine. When it comes to organizational change, the learning becomes really key for how you're actually going to get that organizational change, build that AI fluency, and get to the peak of that higher Maslow.AI's hierarchy. And so closing the gap, what transformation actually looks like. Before, AI feels very threatening to individuals, using AI occasionally, but really inconsistently. They have the fear of actually getting it wrong, passive consumption of AI content to try to learn and develop their skills, and just a lot of consumption of one size fits all training. After you go into AI as your thinking partner, embedded into your daily workflows, really confident experimentation, active co-creation with AI, and then really role relevant personalized paths. And so now we're going to get into how, AI is reshaping your training business. And so I want to talk about how AI can actually be leveraged in building out these AI fluency, using AI to build out the AI fluency training. So building, delivering, scaling the programs, and curious to know as we go through this where everybody's at. We'll focus on the three kind of areas where we use AI a lot at Disco and within the platform. The first one is AI for program generation, so actually creating the programs that we want to run. The second one is for actually delivering a learner experience. And then the third one is AI for operational excellence. And so first, for AI for program generation, I'm curious, how are you currently using AI in your program development process, if at all? Again, feel free to pop a comment in the chat or raise your hand or just come off mute and feel free to speak.
This is Michael with Faktor. I guess I'll go ahead and speak. We're a sales training company, so we go into organizations and we deliver leadership training and sales training to inside sales reps. And the way we're using AI today, we're using it to help us with evaluating like recorded calls. And for example, we're pumping our content and our style of sales coaching and training into an AI tool. So it has our mind, and then we're putting in the transcripts or the recorded calls from reps, and we're using that to help us to, in large volumes, coach skill topics and identify gaps as well as strengths in those calls. So it's a big part of how we're using AI today. We also use it to actually update our workshop decks. Some of the facilitator notes can be bare bones, and so we're using AI to add some flavor, add some color, some better questions and transitions between slides as well. And those are some of the common ways we're using AI today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Michael. This is really cool, especially that first workflow I really love for the sales training. What kind of like tools, what's the workflow look like for that?
Yeah, we are in an experimentation phase. Initially, we started with tools like ChatGPT and Claude to do those things, and we're currently working with a Grow AI as the tool that we're using right now, primarily for the call recordings and the coaching.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else in the call want to share how they're using AI in their program development process?
Yeah, this is Michael. We work primarily with leadership development. So we have a whole host of assessments that we developed and psychometrically validated over time. And so we're using AI to help interpret their results in real time so that they can see the assessment results and then transfer that into a meaningful development plan on where do we go from here.
Awesome. Very, very cool. The Michaels are taking over. Anybody else on the call? I'll do the classic pause
Yeah,
and then,
actually,
okay, I'll go.
Oh, sorry, Chase. I
Oh,
was going to ask
go
really
ahead.
quick. Sorry, Michael G, if you don't mind. It sounds like you're using AI for strategy. That's really interesting. Could you tell me more about how you're implementing that?
Yeah, we're not necessarily using it for strategy, Joshua. We're using it primarily, I guess you could look at it and say strategy, but it's primarily set up within a set parameters of whatever assessment they're going through or the course they're going through that helps them create an actionable plan based on their results. Or if I'm going to have a difficult meeting, I can come in and I can interface with the tool based on my strengths and weaknesses that I currently had from whatever assessment I'm using. And it gives me ways to deal with a difficult personality or problem solve. It gives us a host of ideas that they can choose from.
Interesting. Okay. So it's like preparing them for either like a call or some kind of a meeting.
A call, a meeting, but really the primary focus is if I look out over the next 30, 60, 90 days, and I see I have these opportunities for development, what are some ideas based on my title, my position, my industry, my whatever? And I've been able to massage that based on the specific assessment data. How do we now go forward? What's my path forward? So it's not just a one and done learning experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like an ongoing sort of, almost like a mentor, it sounds like.
That's right.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're
Well, that's a good question from Sasha. Yeah. How do you address privacy concerns in different contexts? I can speak a bit to the disco side, if that's helpful, Sasha. So generally, the biggest privacy concern when people are putting in data, interacting with these AI tools, is worry about where does my data get stored? If I'm asking a really tight question, or if I'm uploading client data, how do you manage that? And for context, I used to focus a lot on the engineering side. So I worked a lot with how we're storing data and how it's encrypted and the tools that we're using. Effectively, there are a number of frameworks like GDPR that like Disco and a lot of similar tools follow that are there's certain standards that basically control how can you store data. Users need to be able to delete data when they leave, and whether or not the data is being used, say by AI providers for training and other things. So most like large enterprise tools, they'll specifically design everything that they're using so that they're in compliance with frameworks like that. GDPR is a really good one to look at. SOC 2 is also like a very big umbrella cover. So at least from a technical side, like everything that Disco does, it actually it's quite a challenge, but there's a lot of extra time that it takes to making sure that the data is used in a very careful way. And the biggest thing is just that if a user wants to remove their data, we're not using it for anything outside of just their organization. So if you upload client data, it doesn't exist anywhere else. Then another challenge is actually if one person in my organization owns one project, that doesn't mean that everybody in the organization should be able to see that. So from a technical perspective, the challenge is basically just making sure that's accounted for. And you do things like regular audits to stay SOC 2 compliant and GDPR. But really good question. That's the engineering side, but I'm sure that kind of depends org by org. Yeah, I don't know, Michael, do you have any sort of thoughts on that as well in your organizations?
No, other than the fact that we're pretty upfront and transparent about what type of tools and technologies that we're using. They're not ours proprietary. And to your point, they're also like the SOC 2 compliant and GDPR as well. And yeah.
This probably goes without saying, but we pop up a compliance statement and explain exactly how the tool will process data, and they have to agree to it before they go in and actually use the tool. And that, frankly, that happens every time that they go to use that tool. It's a little annoying, but it just is full disclosure.
Yeah. Necessary annoyance. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I think for the impact on AI program generation, definitely, I think both commented really around like these more like personalized experiences and definitely having more of a mentor, like coach like experience where it can really like tailor things by for you based a call transcript with a bunch of context or based on your role, industry, skill level, being able to actually adapt, whether it's like a more traditional learning experience, like an actual course pathway that they're going through, or whether it is more like a coach that they can go to in these moments. That personalization is really key. On like the production side, I think there's a really big impact of AI on program generation, just in shrinking the time that it takes to actually create programs. I know being an instructor, obviously creating, if you're creating more kind of like traditional courses, these take a lot of time to actually build out. And so program generation with AI being able to obviously condense that and instead of being, months long to actually build, being able to do it in essentially minutes to weeks. And I think the last one is just like human in the loop. So AI obviously drafts like the work, but humans have to do the actual refinement and quality. And I think that's where like at Disco, we always get so interested in not just being able to build maybe like a program faster, but actually being able to have a higher quality experience at the end of the day based on that. We've got like a really quick video here. I can play and just voice over, but what AI program generation looks like in Disco is you can basically, when creating any sort of program, be able to just upload your own context. So you can upload documents, different things, input a lot of information. This could be even based on the member's profile. And based on that prompt and the attachment, it'll actually build out that full kind of, I'll just go back here. It'll actually build out that full preview for you. And then conversationally, you can just edit that in line. So just like in ChatGPT and Claude, you can actually create that experience back and forth just through conversation, editing individual modules, individual lessons. And in the end, it actually builds out the full experience with the full curriculum breakdown of all of your modules, the lessons, the quizzes, everything kind of pulls in your academy like branding and color. So it generates a lot of that creative work. So you don't have to worry about too many of those things. And then the really cool thing is getting into the individual lessons. It actually builds out the full in-depth like lesson, the quiz questions, the prompts, the assignments. And at the end of each of these individual items, it has Ask AI suggested prompts, right? So at the end of each lesson, you can actually get into an AI first experience, jumping to dig deeper into each individual lesson. So that's really nice in that you can create the program for everybody, but each individual member can also have more of that relevance and drill deeper into whatever they want to drill deeper into. Example here, we just want to give a customer example. Coding Temple is one of our customers. In terms of scaling, Coding Temple was able to really scale the learning that they're delivering. They have a really modern online bootcamp for technical training. They had a lot of IP. They were looking to whether they were going to build their own school or how they were going to increase the scale of their programming. And coming over to Disco, they were actually able to see a 52% increase in their engagement, a 23-point increase in NPS, and a 103% increase in cohort retention. So they were actually able to build a bunch of different programs inside of Disco and really scale their offering while also increasing like the overall quality of the experience. The next question is AI for learner experience. So in terms of moving away from like program generation, how do learners get more human-centric learning that is powered by AI? If you haven't done this yet, what's kind of like the dream for the future and where do you see the gaps at the moment? Michael, you talked about more of that, I guess, learner experience side in what each of you were bringing up. But I guess like looking at the second question to that as well, what would be like the dream on where you would like to see things going for those experiences or where are the gaps at this moment?
I think for me in the space that I'm in this sales training and coaching space, it is that ability for reps to be able to interact and engage more vocally with the AI. So a good example and dream scenario is to say a rep's got a call that they need to prep for, right? And to be able to have a conversation that kind of simulates that C-level executive conversation or that demo might sound like, is to help them to go into that conversation confident and on top of all of their kind of key points. I think that's, and as far as on the sales side of things, that's a dream future, just to further accelerate how they're picking up the sales skills, whether it's questioning, listening, overcoming objections, things.
Yeah, certainly. Like, especially if you have a context on who that call is going to be with, and you can almost build a persona out of that. That's really cool. To riff off of that, I know Reforge has some different tools. And so for me as like a designer, one of the things that they allowed you to do is you can create these customer personas, and similar to how you would want to almost role play out with a sales rep, they allow like product teams to put designs in front of that persona. So it's like similar concept in terms of create the persona of who we're trying to have some sort of impact with and be able to just like test and practice real time. Yeah, that's something we're actively thinking about. Josh can comment here as well at Disco, is getting deeper into not just asking questions, but role playing scenarios that are more practical.
Yeah, definitely the kind of AI coaching piece, both as a bit of a mentor, but also almost as like a partner where you can like simulate conversations.
Yes.
It's a big engineering challenge, but half the team is working on AI focused features on that end, and then we're doing it step by step. So a nice piece of that too is that when you have a really kind of internal AI architecture versus using something like ChatGPT with a tool, you can keep all of your data persistent in the same place. So right now, the Ask AI basically means that anybody in any course can have a tailored personal kind of tutor experience, and it's basically built straight into it. So the plan is to build off of that and then reach a state where you can have almost like a personalized conversation in I guess like a simulation scenario.
Josh, can I ask a question?
Sure, yeah.
How far away are we from actually having that coach companion avatar that actually can understand your strategy and not hallucinate? That we've experimented with that, but it's still lazy and it's not quite what I would call a deliverable experience that you could trust beyond just giving you ideas.
Yeah. What has your experience been with so far? What tools are you using for that?
We've tried, I think our team's tried we tried them all. And so I shouldn't say them all, but we've tried the top, say three or four, and they're not quite there yet. It's just not from a quantitative third party objective voice without being too agreeable or just moving your narrative forward. I don't know, maybe there's a better tool than what we use, but we've tried, of course, Chat, Claude, and the other top models.
Yeah, I think what I can say is that on the Disco side, there's sort of two engineering challenges. And as far as I can tell, no other companies have figured this out really well either. So it's nice to know that it's a hard problem. Effectively, a big part of the experience is that like actual communication. So if I'm speaking, like, is there quick latency? Audio is quite the challenge because like usually what happens is that you have an output that's actually in text that's then turned into an audio transcript, and that has to happen live for you to get a really good experience. That tends to be just it's quite challenging and it's quite expensive to run. But the other side, what you mentioned, where it has a better understanding and it almost like evolves over time like a person would. It's interesting because it's like a totally different challenge, but it's equally important. What we've seen so far, at least internally, is that Claude can do really good work, but you have to spend quite a bit of time engineering it yourself. And you really need to build out skills within Claude or even set up Claude projects to do that for you. I also found that Claude, it's interesting, they tend to be a better AI like thinker. It's just better at writing and speaking per se. But ChatGPT is actually quite a bit better at the first challenge, which is like sounding like a person and having that quick inference. So I don't think I can give a timeline that would be definitive, but what I can say is that it's moving quicker than I would have expected it, because both of those problems to solve, all the kind of the models behind it, they're advancing very quickly. And the audio side of it too is actually, in the last few months alone, they've made some pretty big strides. We're working hard as well.
Yeah. I think that's definitely where the value of more kind of purpose-built tools come in, because obviously for like the more general kind of LLMs out there. Like they're just very wide. And so I think they struggle in a lot of those use cases and it just takes a lot of that like prompt engineering to focus, let's say like an agent in on what its identity is and how it's supposed to behave. And anytime you're using just like a general purpose one, I find the same thing, right? Where it's not really delivering a lot of value. But yeah, I think that's where the purpose built kind of tools come in with that extra engineering layer around them, as we're finding out. We don't got too much more time left, so I'll like quickly go through these last couple of slides and then just open it up for any other broader questions. But obviously on the impact of AI in the learner experience, like in Disco, we have that Ask AI functionality where you can instantly ask questions, drill deeper into lessons, or just receive some coaching around like a particular topic. I think that just helps dig into like deeper learnings, more contextual explanations. And then this is what we've been talking about right now. In the future, we're looking a lot into feedback, more like tailored kind of agents for role play feedback. Right now, we're working on knowledge assessments. And so lots of exciting things to dig into there. The last thing that was going to cover here, which is AI for operations, and in terms of just operational efficiency, obviously like curating knowledge, but two other kind of things that we're very focused on is one, connecting members with one another. So in Disco, we actually have like really great functionality for getting suggested responses to discussions that are taking place. So if there's good conversations happening, we don't want any conversation, any sort of like question to go unanswered. And so our Disco AI will actually suggest responses that often will connect with other members who may have the responses. So rather than just like providing the answer, actually being able to do that community manager role where you're able to connect different members within a community. And then the last one is obviously like automating workflows, right? So triggering automations for enrollment, for group creation, and delivering experiences from there. And that's kind of everything that we're looking to go through today. I had to blitz through the last few slides, but yeah, the future belongs to those who can unlock human potential. And last few minutes here, we can take a couple questions if there's any questions, but very much appreciate everybody joining us over this hour, and hopefully this was really helpful.